The knock came at exactly 6:17 p.m. 3 rapid taps, then silence. Kamala paused her knife mid-chop, celery forgotten on the cutting board. She wasn't expecting anyone. Outside, the rain hammered against the windows, blurring the world into streaks of muted green and gray, a constant backdrop to her new life. She wiped her hands on a dish towel and patted across the hardwood floor. Peering through the peephole revealed an empty porch. Frowning, Kamala opened the door a crack, letting in a rush of damp air. The porch light cast a lonely yellow circle on the wet wood. There, at her feet, sat a package wrapped in brown paper and twine, about the size of a shoebox. "Hello?" she called, stepping out and scanning the yard. Only the relentless drumming of raindrops on leaves answered. Whoever left it had vanished as quickly as they'd appeared. "Hello?" she called, stepping out and scanning the yard. Only the relentless drumming of raindrops on leaves answered. Whoever left it had vanished as quickly as they'd appeared. Kamala picked up the package. A cream-colored envelope was tucked under the twine, her name written in a neat blue script. She hurried back inside, closing the door against the chill, and placed the mysterious delivery on her kitchen counter. The note inside held just 6 words. "For a rainy day. Your neighbor." "My neighbor?" Kamala murmured to the quiet kitchen. In the 3 weeks since moving into the duplex, her interactions with the man next door, Lucas, had been limited to a fleeting nod as he rushed to his car before dawn, or a brief glimpse of his back as he unlocked his door late at night. Kamala untied the twine and unwrapped the paper. Inside was an old wooden box with brass hinges. She lifted the lid. A record player. A vintage one, beautifully maintained, with a stack of vinyl records nestled beside it. Another note inside read, "Music makes everything better, especially rain." Kamala plugged in the record player and placed the first record on the turntable. The warm, mellow sounds of jazz filled her half-unpacked living room as the rain continued its steady descent. She sank onto her sofa, eyes closed, letting the music wash over her. The melancholy notes seemed to soften the edges of the persistent rain, giving it a strange sort of comfort. The move here, a non-negotiable clause in her promotion after Meridian Books swallowed her small publishing house, had uprooted her from her familiar Chicago life. Saying goodbye to her book club, her favorite coffee shop, the apartment she'd carefully decorated over 3 years. It had all felt like shedding a skin. Now in this new town, where gray skies seemed the default setting, so unlike Chicago's distinct seasons, the isolation had begun to settle in. For 3 weeks, unpacking and learning her new role had kept her busy, but the relentless rain of the past few days had amplified the quiet. Kamala turned up the volume slightly and returned to making her soup. It no longer felt like just a solitary meal, but a quiet accompaniment to an unexpected and thoughtful gift. From his window, Lucas watched the play of surprise, and then something softer crossed Kamala's face as she discovered the package. He hadn't intended to intrude, but the space between their lives felt thin, permeable by rain and unspoken feelings, and the courage he hadn't yet found. His phone buzzed with another canceled job, the 3rd this month. He silenced it, the familiar sting a dull ache, and turned back to his easel. A half-finished landscape waited, the vibrant greens and blues mocking the gray reality outside that had stalled his outdoor commission. Mixing more blue into his palette, he listened to the faint strains of music seeping through the shared wall. The old jazz standards he'd included with a record player. His grandmother's favorites. Lucas dabbed paint onto the canvas, the rain-slicked streets he'd photographed last week forming in his mind, a memory anchored by the defiant yellow of a lone umbrella. He glanced at the clock. 5 hours had bled away in the rhythm of the brushstrokes. Through the wall the music fell silent. The rain, however, persisted, a steady, almost comforting murmur. The gift had been a sudden impulse. The record player, his grandmother's, rescued from his parents' attic after they sold their house last year, was something he'd intended to keep. but last night had shifted his resolve. Returning home late from yet another gallery that was scaling back on new artists, the relentless rain had mirrored the dampening of his spirits. He'd noticed Kamala then, a solitary figure on their shared porch, simply letting the downpour wash over her. The slump of her shoulders, the stillness in her posture, had resonated with a forgotten ache. She hadn't even flinched at the occasional splash from the overflowing gutter. Later, a muffled sound through the thin wall had hinted at tears. It had taken him back to his own early days in this town, before he'd found a strange solace in the rain's constancy. The sharp edges of isolation. The feeling of drifting in a place that offered no anchor. His grandmother's record player, those warm melodies filling empty rooms, had been a lifeline then. This morning, acting before doubt could take root, he'd packed it up. A quick call to Mrs. Fielding, the retired music teacher 2 doors down, had secured a discreet delivery. "I'm too shy," he'd admitted, and her cheerful laughter had been a small burst of sunshine in the gray morning. Now, hearing the echoes of jazz through the wall, a quiet satisfaction mingled with a burgeoning curiosity. He wondered about the woman next door, the path that had led her here, and the source of the profound sadness he'd glimpsed in the rain. The next morning broke clear and crisp. As Kamala left for work at the library, locking her door, she nearly bumped into a tall figure standing just off her porch. "Oh, sorry," she exclaimed, stepping back. "My fault," the man replied, a slight awkwardness in his voice. "Didn't see you there." Lucas, her neighbor. In the bright morning light she noticed details previously unseen, the faint smudges of paint on his fingers, the surprising flecks of green that danced within his brown eyes, the way his dark hair possessed a subtle, appealing curl at his temples. "Good morning," Kamala said, the memory of the previous evening's mysterious delivery surfacing. "Did you happen to leave something at my door yesterday?" Lucas's brow furrowed slightly. "What?" "No, I was at a client's place, until well after dark." "Oh," a warmth crept into Kamala's cheeks. "Someone left me a record player with a note saying it was from my neighbor." "Wasn't me," Lucas gestured vaguely toward the house across the street. "Maybe Mr. Peterson?" "He's got all sorts of old things." "The gentleman with the impressive collection of classic cars?" "That's him." A small smile touched Lucas's lips. "Though I think he's branched out. Saw a shiny vintage Harley in his garage last week." Kamala laughed softly. "I'll ask him." "Thanks." She hurried down the steps, a faint awareness of Lucas watching her receding figure lingering. There was a subtle shift in his gaze today, a focused attention that hadn't been present in their brief, previous encounters. At work, the mystery of the record player kept nudging its way into Kamala's thoughts. The editorial meeting about the latest biology textbook revisions seemed to stretch endlessly. After 7 years immersed in the nuances of literary fiction, the straightforward practicality of educational publishing felt stark. Gone were the lyrical sentences, the subtle emotional currents, replaced by the efficient arrangement of facts. "Kamala, your insights on the marine biology chapter." Her supervisor's voice cut through her mental wandering. "I think we could benefit from more engaging examples," she offered, straightening in her chair. "The information is sound, but it lacks a certain connection. Students need to feel something for the material." Her boss nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps," she mused, "there was a way to weave the essence of storytelling even into these factual texts." That evening, Kamala found herself on Mr. Peterson's doorstep. The elderly man greeted her with a twinkle in his eye, clearly enjoying the unexpected company, but looked utterly bewildered by her inquiry. "A record player, you say?" "No, my dear. Though now that you mention it, what a delightful idea. Good old-fashioned music is precisely what this generation needs." The mystery of the gifts lingered in Kamala's mind throughout the week. She found herself replaying the encounters, searching for clues in the neighbors' expressions. Each evening she played the records, the jazz filling the rooms between her half-unpacked boxes. Some nights, when the silence of her new surroundings pressed in, she'd turn the volume up a little, a silent question sent through the shared wall. Was Lucas listening too? Did the music bother him? A week later, another rainy evening arrived, bringing with it another package. This time, Kamala spotted a figure retreating down the porch steps and called out, her voice cutting through the drumming of the rain. "Wait." The figure paused, shoulders hunched against the downpour. "Hello?" Kamala ventured onto the porch. "Did you leave this?" The person turned. Not Lucas, but a kind-faced woman with a halo of silver hair tucked beneath a practical plastic rain bonnet, her cheeks rosy from the damp air. "He said you'd enjoy these," the woman offered, gesturing to the package with a gentle smile. "Who said?" But the woman simply nodded and hurried away, disappearing into the gray curtain of rain. The second package held baking treasures, fragrant vanilla beans, rich specialty chocolate, and a handwritten recipe for rainy day cookies. The accompanying note read, "Sweet things for when the weather isn't." A friend. Kamala followed the instructions, the scent of chocolate and vanilla soon filling her kitchen, mingling with the familiar strains of jazz from the record player. The simple act of baking, a ritual she hadn't indulged in since leaving Chicago, momentarily transported her back to Sunday afternoons in her old apartment, preparing treats for her beloved book club meetings. She missed those women dearly. Carolyn, with her incisive observations on character motivation. Donnie, who always possessed the perfect wine pairing to enhance the book's atmosphere. Sophia, whose emotions mirrored the narrative, her tears flowing freely at happy endings and her laughter echoing at sad ones. Her phone lay on the counter. She could call them. But what words would form? How could she explain that she was baking cookies alone on a rainy night because a mysterious stranger kept leaving ingredients at her door? How could she articulate the ache of homesickness that sometimes constricted her breath? Instead, she carefully divided the cookies onto 2 plates. One small gesture of connection felt less daunting than the vast expanse of her loneliness. A moment of hesitation passed before she found herself standing outside Lucas's door. What if he found this gesture odd? But the burning question of the anonymous gifts outweighed her apprehension. Lucas answered on the third knock, his t-shirt splattered with vibrant paint, a brush clutched in one hand. "Sorry to interrupt," Kamala began, offering the plate with a nervous smile. "I made a few too many cookies." His face lit up with genuine warmth. "You're a lifesaver." "I completely spaced on dinner." He stepped back, gesturing inward. "Come on in." Kamala stepped into a space transformed by the language of art. Canvases leaned against walls, landscape paintings in various stages of completion. Rain scenes dominated, droplets clinging to leaves, city lights reflected in shimmering puddles, mist shrouding distant forests. "These are beautiful," she breathed, captivated by a painting of their street, bathed in a soft downpour. "Thanks. I'm a landscape artist." Specializing in rain, which sounds oddly specific, but it usually pays the bills. Lucas set down his brush, a wry smile playing on his lips. "Most of the time." "Usually." "Lately, not so much." "Commissions have dried up." He winced at his unintentional pun. Terrible choice of words. "I work in publishing," Kamala offered, a shared note of professional vulnerability in her voice. "Science textbooks currently, though I used to be in literary fiction. Not exactly a glamorous existence either way. But necessary. People need to learn." He gestured towards a cluttered table, strewn with brushes, tubes of paint, and scattered sketches. "Want to squeeze in somewhere? I think I can conjure up some coffee amidst the chaos." They talked late into the night, the hours dissolving into a comfortable exchange of thoughts and stories. They spoke of the comforting rhythm of rain against different surfaces, the insistent tap on the window pane versus the soft hush on fallen leaves. They reminisced about the vibrant energy of Chicago and the quiet charm of their previous towns, and the unexpected paths that had led them to this shared duplex. They discovered a mutual appreciation for how certain melodies could unlock vivid memories, transporting them back to specific moments in time. "I ended up here from Chicago," Kamala confessed. "A company acquisition. It wasn't exactly a choice if I wanted to keep my job." "That's a tough break," Lucas responded, his gaze thoughtful. "Leaving your whole life behind." "It is," she admitted, a touch of melancholy in her voice. "But maybe that's just part of growing up, isn't it? Making the difficult decisions." Lucas nodded slowly, his eyes reflecting a shared understanding. "I came here for art school about 6 years ago. My plan was always to move to New York after graduation, but then my grandmother became ill. I stayed to help care for her." "Is she?" Kamala asked gently. "She passed away 2 years ago." Lucas's gaze drifted down to the coffee mug he held, a fleeting shadow crossing his face. "But by then, I'd started to build a life here. Gallery representation, steady commission work. It began to feel more logical to stay than to start all over in New York." "The record player," Kamala said softly, shifting the conversation away from the lingering sadness. "Are you enjoying it?" "I am. It's become my favorite thing in this new, often too quiet place." Kamala studied his earnest expression. "Are you absolutely sure you didn't leave it?" Lucas's eyebrows rose in playful innocence. "I swear I didn't. Though now you've got me just as curious about our benevolent phantom." "Me too, and today brought baking supplies, along with this recipe." She unfolded the handwritten note. "Does the handwriting look familiar at all?" Lucas leaned closer, examining the looping script. He shook his head. "Nope. But these cookies are seriously addictive." "They are, aren't they?" Kamala agreed, savoring another bite. "Our mysterious gift-giver certainly has excellent taste." The conversation flowed effortlessly, punctuated by comfortable silences and shared laughter, as if the hours they'd spent together were merely a continuation of a long-standing connection. When Kamala finally retreated to her side of the duplex, a lightness had settled within her. A sense of being seen, of being understood. For the first time since her arrival, she had shared her story with someone who had truly listened, not out of politeness or concern, but with genuine interest in the person she was. The next day, a gentle rap sounded not on her front door, but on the shared walls separating their units. A smile touched Kamala's lips at the unexpected, playful intimacy of it, and she tapped back. Lucas invited her to lunch in the nearby park. The grass, still holding the memory of yesterday's rain, glistened under a bright, cheerful sun. He'd brought a blanket and sandwiches from the corner deli. "I've lived here for 6 months," he confessed as they watched children shriek with laughter as they chased each other around the playground. "And this is my very first picnic in this park." "Why not?" Kamala asked, genuinely curious. "Never really had a reason to stop working during the day. The canvases don't paint themselves, unfortunately." He leaned back on his elbows, his gaze following a kite dancing in the breeze. "But you knocked on my door yesterday, so—" "So?" she prompted gently. "So today felt like it needed something different." After lunch, they strolled through the arboretum, the air filled with the fresh scent of damp earth and blooming flowers. Lucas pointed out the fascinating ways different trees embraced the lingering raindrops, some forming perfect glistening spheres, others drinking the water until it vanished into the intricate patterns of their bark. "You really do love the rain," Kamala observed, a smile in her voice. "Not at first," Lucas gently touched a rain-kissed leaf. "I grew up in Arizona. Rain was a rare and almost mythical event. When I moved east for art school, I hated it. The constant dampness, the endless gray." "What changed your mind?" "My professor gave us an assignment, paint what we feared or disliked. I chose rain." A soft smile touched his lips at the memory. I spent weeks just watching storms, and somewhere in the observation, the fear transformed into fascination. Now, I can't imagine painting anything else. What about you? How do you feel about rainy days? Kamala considered his question thoughtfully. They used to make me feel a bit melancholic in my old apartment. The sound seemed to echo off all the surrounding concrete. She hesitated for a moment, then decided to be completely honest. When I first moved here, the constant rain felt almost mocking. Like, welcome to your new life. It's going to be perpetually gray. And now? He asked, his gaze steady and interested. Now. She looked up at the vibrant green canopy of trees overhead, sunlight filtering through the leaves. Here it feels different. Less isolating somehow. That night, Lucas stood at his window, watching the rain begin to fall again, collecting in shimmering puddles on their shared walkway. He thought about Kamala's confession, the sting of the rain feeling like mockery upon her arrival. He imagined the weight of loneliness she must have carried, uprooted and replanted by circumstances beyond her control. He remembered witnessing her on the porch that rainy evening, the profound stillness of someone bearing their sadness like a tangible burden. And he recalled his grandmother's gentle wisdom, her unwavering belief in the power of small acts of kindness to bridge even the widest divides between people. A familiar name popped into his mind. Lucas picked up his phone and texted Mrs. Fielding. That night, a message from Lucas popped up on Kamala's phone, accompanied by a breathtaking photo of a vibrant rainbow arcing over the familiar green expanse of the park. Thought you'd want to see the aftermath of all that rain. Kamala replied with a photo of her own, her shelf of books now arranged in a spectrum of color. Speaking of unexpected bursts of color, it became a cherished ritual, this quiet exchange of visual snippets from their days. A steaming coffee mug in the morning light. The dramatic sweep of interesting cloud formations. A glimpse of the lines and shadows in Lucas's evolving sketches. Even the surprisingly captivating detail of a cellular structure in a biology illustration Kamala had deemed perfect for the new textbook. Digital messages blossomed into invitations for shared dinners, cozy movie nights on her sofa, and leisurely walks through the tree-lined neighborhood. Kamala introduced Lucas to the comforting scent and endless possibilities of her favorite bookstore. He unveiled a hidden art gallery run by a quiet friend, a space where the raw talent of local artists found its voice. I really do miss working with fiction, Kamala confessed one evening, her fingers tracing the spines of well-loved novels. There's something truly magical about helping shape a story that might offer someone a new perspective, or simply provide comfort when they feel utterly alone. I feel that same pull with art, Lucas murmured, his gaze soft. When someone looks at one of my paintings and tells me it makes them feel less isolated in their own experience of the world, that's everything. Each subsequent rainy day brought another carefully chosen gift to Kamala's doorstep. A set of vibrant watercolor paints one time, a slender volume of poetry the next, followed by handmade candles that carried the evocative scent of petrichor, the earthy fragrance that rises after a rainfall. And always, the same simple note, for a rainy day. And always, the same puzzled responses from her neighbors when she inquired. Polite confusion, firm denials. You've definitely got a secret admirer, Lucas mused one evening as they sat on her porch, watching the silent ballet of lightning flickering between distant clouds. Someone who truly seems to understand you. It is strange, though, isn't it? Kamala pondered, her brow furrowed slightly. Who would go to such lengths? Lucas simply shrugged, his gaze fixed on the distant light show. Someone who cares deeply. Maybe they're just a little shy. Kamala studied his profile in the dim light, a flicker of suspicion dancing in her mind. Could he possibly know more than he was letting on? But his expression remained open, an unreadable canvas in the twilight. As the vibrant hues of spring softened into the warmer embrace of summer, Kamala found herself drawn to Lucas's doorstep with increasing frequency. Mornings often began with the shared warmth of coffee before work, an unspoken invitation to linger a little longer. Evenings sometimes culminated in a gentle knock on her door, Lucas bearing a sweet offering from the downtown bakery. On the languid, humid nights that made sleep a distant dream, they would retreat to the small shared porch, their voices weaving into the symphony of crickets until the fireflies winked out and the vast expanse of stars claimed the sky. "I've started writing again," Kamala confessed one starlit night, the words feeling both vulnerable and liberating. "Just a novel, something purely for myself." "Oh, that's wonderful." "What's it about?" Lucas asked, his voice filled with genuine interest. "It's about a woman who unknowingly controls the weather with her emotions. Her sadness manifests as storms, but she's initially oblivious to the connection." "That sounds absolutely fascinating," Lucas said, leaning forward. Would you let me read it someday?" "Maybe," Kamala replied, a soft smile playing on her lips. "If it ever sees the light of day. It's the first creative endeavor since moving here that truly feels like my own." One stormy night, a particularly violent downpour plunged their neighborhood into darkness. Kamala, guided by the beam of her flashlight, made her way to Lucas's door. "I think my apartment is about to float away," she joked, her voice a little breathless as he opened the door. "Well, Noah's Ark might be at capacity, but I do have an abundance of candles," he replied, a warm smile illuminating his face as he stepped aside. They transformed his living room into a cozy sanctuary, draping blankets over furniture to create a makeshift fort. Their voices hushed in the flickering candlelight as thunder rattled the windows. "I've never experienced rain quite like this," Kamala admitted, watching the shadows dance on the blanket walls. "It's always been my favorite kind." Lucas's face was a study in light and shadow. "Growing up in the desert, I used to imagine rain would be this untamed, this powerful, a force capable of reshaping the entire world overnight. Is that part of why you moved here? For the rain?" "Partly," he admitted, his gaze meeting hers across the small space. "But I think sometimes we're drawn to places for reasons that only become clear much later." "Like what, for instance?" Kamala asked softly, her heart beginning to beat a little faster. Lucas reached out, his hand hovering just inches from hers, a silent question in his eyes, before he drew back. "Like meeting the people we were always meant to find." The air between them thickened, charged with an unspoken electricity. But just then the lights flickered back to life, abruptly shattering the intimate spell, and the moment, pregnant with possibility, dissolved into the returning normalcy. In August, a company-wide email announced a restructuring. Kamala's position remained secure, but it came with a new requirement: monthly travel to the main office 3 states away. "It's just for a few days each time," she explained to Lucas over a quiet dinner at her place. "But I'll really miss," she trailed off, a sudden wave of emotion catching her off guard. "Miss what?" Lucas prompted gently, his gaze steady. "You," her heart whispered. "I'll miss you." "Home," she said instead, the word feeling inadequate yet safe. "I'll miss being home." Lucas nodded, his expression understanding. "I actually have some travel coming up, too." "For work?" "An artist retreat in Maine. I'll be teaching a workshop on capturing light and shadow in rainy landscapes." "That's wonderful, Lucas." Kamala raised her wine glass, a genuine smile gracing her lips, though a faint undercurrent of wistfulness lingered beneath. "We should definitely celebrate." But beneath their cheerful toasts, a new awareness settled between them. Their easy rhythm of shared moments, the spontaneous coffee dates, the comforting dinners, the late-night porch conversations, would soon be punctuated by absences, requiring deliberate planning. The night before Kamala's first business trip, another familiar package appeared on her doorstep. Inside, nestled in soft tissue paper, was a beautiful travel journal with decollaged pages and a smooth fountain pen. The accompanying note simply read, "For rainy days away from home." "It's almost eerie," she murmured to Lucas as she packed her suitcase. How does this person always anticipate exactly what I need? Maybe they've just been paying very close attention, Lucas suggested, leaning against her doorframe, his eyes soft. That's how you truly get to know someone, isn't it? By noticing the small, quiet details. Like what, for example? He smiled, a knowing warmth in his eyes. Like the way your fingers instinctively brush against the spines of books whenever you pass a shelf. Or the way you tap a silent rhythm to the rain against the window pane. Or your unwavering preference for dark chocolate, but only after dinner, never before. Kamala stared at him, a sudden realization dawning. You've actually noticed all of that? Kamala, Lucas said quietly, his gaze holding hers, I notice everything about you. The air in the small hallway crackled with unspoken words, a silent confession hanging between them. Kamala took a hesitant step closer, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs, but the insistent honk of her waiting taxi pierced the charged moment. I have to go, she stammered, her eyes still locked on his. I know, Lucas replied softly, a hint of longing in his voice. Have a safe trip. The distance felt like a subtle ache. Throughout her days away, Kamala found herself instinctively reaching for her phone, wanting to share fleeting moments with Lucas, the dramatic sweep of unfamiliar clouds, the intricate details of a building's facade, even the mundane offerings of the hotel room service menu. His responses were equally immediate, offering glimpses into his world. The vibrant hues of a painting taking shape on his easel, a fragile bird's nest nestled in the branches outside his studio window, the mesmerizing patterns traced by raindrops on his skylight. It's strange, a text from him read one quiet evening, how unexpectedly empty the duplex feels without you here. Kamala gazed out at the unfamiliar sprawl of city lights from her hotel window, a similar sense of quiet absence settling within her. I know exactly what you mean. During meetings with her former colleagues from Chicago, a subtle but significant shift became apparent to Kamala. They spoke of familiar haunts and office dynamics, but her thoughts kept drifting back to her new town, to the hidden corners Lucas had unveiled, to the unfolding narrative of her novel, to the comforting rhythm of rain on their shared porch roof. You seem different, her former office mate observed over lunch, a curious note in her voice. Happier, maybe? Do I? Kamala mused, a genuine smile touching her lips as she considered the possibility. I believe I am. Returning home a week later felt like a breath of fresh air. Her porch, once bare, now overflowed with lush, potted plants, their leaves glistening as if still damp from a recent shower. The accompanying note read, Living Things for a Living Space. Welcome home. Lucas was there, leaning against the railing of their shared porch, a book open in his hands, though his gaze lifted immediately as her taxi pulled to a stop. Those are lovely plants, he said, a warm smile gracing his lips as he reached for her suitcase. Another mysterious delivery, Kamala replied, her eyes twinkling. Any confessions to make regarding green thumbs? About the plants? Absolutely not. He took her bag, his hand brushing hers. But I did happen to make dinner. Pasta okay? Over the comforting familiarity of pasta and wine, they traded stories from their brief separations. Kamala found herself drawn to him across the small table, noticing the expressive way his hands moved as he spoke, the endearing crinkle of laugh lines around his eyes, the quiet attentiveness with which he recalled even the smallest details from her previous anecdotes. You know, she said softly as they stood side by side at the sink, the gentle clinking of dishes filling the air, I've never felt this comfortable with anyone so quickly. Lucas handed her a freshly washed plate to dry, his gaze meeting hers. Me neither. It's like... Like what? She prompted, a sense of anticipation building within her. Like we've known each other for a lifetime, not just a few months. Their fingers brushed as she took the plate, a fleeting spark of connection that lingered for a beat longer than necessary. A jolt of electricity coursed through Kamala. She looked up, her heart suddenly pounding, to find Lucas watching her, his expression a potent blend of unspoken question and quiet certainty. The moment stretched, thick with unspoken possibilities, the comfortable silence charged with a new kind of awareness. But just then, the insistent trill of Lucas's phone shattered the delicate connection. It was his gallery, calling about the final preparations for his upcoming show. The fragile bubble of their intimacy popped, leaving a lingering sense of what might have been. 3 months after the first gift, the gallery downtown showcased Lucas's work. Kamala wore her best dress and arrived early, wanting to support him properly. Lucas looked different in a button-down shirt, his hair tamed, conversation flowing easily with potential buyers. He caught Kamala's eye across the room and excused himself. "You came," he said, touching her elbow lightly. "Of course I did. These are amazing, Lucas." She stopped in front of a painting that knocked the breath from her lungs. It showed a woman, clearly Kamala, sitting on her porch steps as rain fell around her. She held something in her hands, the wooden record player from the first gift. "When did you?" Kamala whispered. Lucas looked at the floor. "I saw you that first night. From my window. You looked so happy discovering what was in that box. But you said—" "I said I didn't leave it at your door." "I didn't. Mrs. Fielding did as a favor to me. I was too nervous to do it myself." Kamala stepped closer to the painting. "It was you." "All of it?" "I noticed how sad you looked that night on the porch, just sitting in the rain. It reminded me of my first months here, how lonely I felt, how the rain seemed to make everything worse." He met her eyes. "I wanted to give you things that might make rainy days better. My grandmother's record player was the first thing I thought of. It helped me when I was at my lowest point." "Why tell me now?" "Because," Lucas gestured to the paintings surrounding them. "These all sold. I got a commission for a whole series from a hotel chain. Rain scenes for every room." He took a deep breath. "And because I'm tired of just being your neighbor." Kamala thought of all the gifts, each one showing such careful attention to who she was and what she might enjoy. The record player that filled her empty home with music. The baking supplies that gave her a project during a storm. The journal that connected her to home while away. The plants that made her space feel alive. Each gift had been a piece of himself, offered without expectation of recognition or gratitude. Each one a small bridge across the loneliness they both felt. "You know, some people just ask for a date like normal humans," she said, but her voice was soft. Lucas laughed. "I've been told I'm not normal." "Neither am I." Kamala reached for his hand. "So what happens now that I know?" "That depends. Are you disappointed it was just me all along?" "Just you?" Kamala shook her head. "Lucas, I've been hoping it was you since the cookies." Outside the gallery windows, clouds gathered. The first drops of rain began to fall as Lucas leaned forward and whispered, "I have one more gift for a rainy day." Their first kiss tasted like possibility and promise, like secrets finally revealed and new ones waiting to be discovered. And so, amidst the rain and thoughtful surprises, a connection bloomed. We hope you enjoyed this full audiobook experience of Finding Love in Unexpected Places. If you did, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts on the story in the comments below. What small gestures have brought unexpected romance into your life? Join us again soon for more heartwarming tales. Until then, may your days be filled with gentle connections and the sweet possibility of love.